Our opening words this morning are by Karen Johnson. Ours is a world alive and allowed with the presence of creatures and critters. Animals abound, interwoven in our human lives and wholly independent. This is the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. I now invite you all to rise in body or spirit to sing our opening hymn number 203, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky. We will be doing this a little differently today. We will be singing verses 1, 2, and 5, so we will be skipping verses 3 and 4.
I'd like to officially welcome you to Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, or BBUUC. My name is Alyssa Halliday, and I am honored to be one of your worship leaders today. As Unitarian Universalists, we strive to live our values aloud, not alone. Our open-minded, open-hearted, spiritual communities help people lead lives of justice, love, learning, and hope. Our path is guided by our principles and purposes, which can be found on the back of your order of service. As we are all navigating through this wondrous journey of life, I am grateful that you have chosen to be here with us today. I'd especially like to acknowledge any guests or newcomers that came out to join us on this wonderful Sunday. If you are a new visitor, we warmly welcome you to our humble church. If you'd like to learn more about our church or Unitarian Universalism, we invite you to check out all of the literature near the entryway on the welcome table. If you are interested in becoming a member of our congregation, We offer regularly scheduled Learn About Us classes, and you can speak to our membership chair, Julie Smithers, who'd be happy to talk to you about the path to membership. For any questions, look for someone with a new Ask Me sticker on their name badge. We invite you to join us after the service for refreshments, including fair trade coffee and conversation, which can be found at the back of the sanctuary. Now, at this time, I'd like to ask everyone to please make sure your electronic devices are silenced so that we can enter into our sacred time together. Each week, we read together our congregational covenant, which defines our promise of community with one another. You can find our covenant printed in your order of service, and I invite you to speak the words aloud together in unison. Please join me. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, seek understanding of our differences, and practice gracious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and those yet to come, so that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. Please rise in body or spirit and join together in singing our call to worship. The words are printed in your order of service. We light our chalice each Sunday morning as a symbol of our faith. I'd like to call John Wrightington up to illuminate our chalice. Our chalice words today are from Florence Chapple. We light this chalice in honor of the animal realm, furred and hoofed, two-legged, four-legged, many-legged, fanged and clawed, gentle and fierce, wild and tame. May we remember that all animals are our relatives, worthy of our care and respect. Thank you, John. Now I'd like to invite one of our co-directors of Lifespan Religious Education, Beth Curtis, up to share our time for all ages.
Anyone who has a pet or has been around animals understands not only does every animal have its own unique personality and intelligence, but the animals can be very responsive to human beings around them. In the lives of the saints, we find that this responsiveness can be brought to unimaginable levels in the presence of holy people. And the stories of St. Francis and the animals are the perfect and most beloved examples of this. It is no wonder that this seraphic friar is known as the patron saint of animals, birds, and the environment. Now here's a little story about St. Francis called St. Francis and the Birds. As St. Francis and some companions were traveling through the Spoleto Valley, which is a valley in Italy, Francis noticed that there was a huge flock of birds of all varieties, doves, crows, and others. They had gathered in some trees beside a field. Francis noticed that the birds were watching him as though they were expecting something. Swept up in the moment, Francis left his friends in the road and ran to the birds. He decided to preach a sermon about the divine love for them, a sermon about how God loved them. He expected them to scurry off into the air, but as he spoke, but they didn't move. He said to them, "My brother and sister birds, let us show thanks for all we've been given. You have been given feathers for clothes, wings to fly, and all of the other things that you need. It is the divine that made you noble amongst all creatures, making your home in the air. Without sowing or reaping, you receive God's guidance and protection." At this, the birds began to spread their wings and stretch their necks and gaze at the saint, rejoicing and praising in the glory of the universe in a wonderful way, in a way only birds can do. Francis then walked right through the middle of them, turned around and came back, touching their heads and their bodies with his tunic. Then he gave them a blessing and waved his hands over them. At that, they flew away, some heading north, some south, east, and west, going in all different directions, as if to pass along the message of divine love to all other creatures. Francis rejoiced and felt so grateful to have shared that special moment with those birds. He rejoined his friends and they went on their way. Later, Francis wondered aloud to his companions why he had never preached to birds before. And from that day on, he made it his habit to invoke all birds, all animals, and reptiles to share love and to be grateful for all things. And many times during his life, there were remarkable stories of St. Francis speaking to animals. There was even a time when he quieted a flock of noisy birds who were interrupting a sacred ceremony. Much to the wonder of everyone at the ceremony, the birds remained silent until the ceremony was over. In 1228, Francis was declared a saint by Pope Gregory IX, who laid the foundation stone for the Basilica of St. Francis in Assisi. A basilica is a really big church. According to legend, the doves at this basilica arrived as soon as the foundation stone was laid and have roosted there ever since. I now invite Evan Holmes to come up and lead the children to their religious education classes. As we pass the flame of justice and religious exploration from one generation to the next, I invite the congregation to remain seated and sing them out with the hymn number 413, Go Now in Peace.
We take an offering each Sunday to give our material resources with generosity and gratitude. The act of giving is a symbolic reminder that giving is just as important as receiving, that sharing what we have is how we live out our value of generosity. We will now receive an offering for the support of this religious community and its work in the world. You are invited to give generously and joyfully as you are willing and able. You can find giving envelopes in the hymnals. For those who prefer an alternative method, you can find the QR code in your order of service to donate, or go to the donate link on our website, bbuuc.org. Whether you choose to donate at this time or not, please participate in this ritual by passing the plate down your row and back to the next. After the offering is complete, please stand in body or spirit and sing our Offertory hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. At this time, I'd like to invite our ushers for today, Renee Berberick and Chuck Smithers, to come forward to accept the offering. The morning offering will be gratefully received. Delighted to introduce our very own Elizabeth DeCoux. Elizabeth is BBUUC's cherished animal chaplain. She's speaking this morning about something we may not think of very often, the spiritual experiences of animals. Now, before I turn it over to Elizabeth, we're going to listen to Dr. Jane Goodall share her observations on this topic.
When the chimpanzees approach, they hear this roaring sound, And you see the hair stand a little on end, and then they move a bit quicker. And when they get here, they'll rhythmically sway, often upright, picking up big rocks and throwing them for maybe 10 minutes. Sometimes climbing up the vines at the side and swinging out into the spray. And they're right down in the water, which normally they avoid. Afterwards, you'll see them sitting on a rock, actually in the stream, looking up, watching the water with their eyes as it falls down, and then watching it going away. I can't help feeling that this waterfall display or dance is perhaps triggered by feelings of awe, wonder that we feel. The chimpanzee's brain is so like ours. They have emotions that are clearly similar to or the same as those that we call happiness, sadness, fear, despair, and so forth. Incredible intellectual abilities that we used to think unique to us. So why wouldn't they also have feelings of some kind of spirituality, which is really being amazed at things outside yourself? And it's the same at the start of heavy rain. I've seen it a couple of times when a sudden wind came roaring through the valley. And it you know, maybe it's defying the elements, defying the rain. Maybe it's the same kind of amazement that they feel with a waterfall. I think chimpanzees are as spiritual as we are, but they can't analyze it, they don't talk about it, they can't describe what they feel. You get the feeling that it's all locked up inside them. And the only way they can express it is through this fantastic rhythmic dance.
Thank you, and good morning. As we consider the spiritual lives of animals, I am reminded of the story of 3 animals who died at the same time and arrived in heaven at the throne of God, seeking entrance into eternal bliss. There was a golden retriever, a Saint Bernard, and a cat. To decide whether to let them into heaven, God asked each of them the same question. He turned to the golden retriever and said, "What do you believe?" And the golden retriever said, "I believe in being a loving and loyal companion to my family." And God said, "Enter into heaven and sit here beside my throne." Then God turned to the Saint Bernard and said, "What do you believe?" And the Saint Bernard said, "I believe in bravery and in rescuing humans who are lost in the snow." God said, "Enter into heaven and sit here beside my throne." Then God turned to the cat and said, "What do you believe?" And the cat said, "I believe you're in my chair." So to think about the spiritual lives of animals, we have to consider what we as Unitarian Universalists mean when we refer to spirituality. We come from many faith traditions, and some of us are agnostics or atheists. So what does spirituality mean to us? We have been having a series of sermons from Reverend Carmen Emerson about spirituality. She has explained that our spirituality is about our relationship with the spirit of life. That fits well with another definition I have seen, which says that spirituality is our connection with the sacred. Now, in our Unitarian Universalist faith, The sacred means different things to different people. To some, the sacred means a personal God, such as Jesus, Yahweh, or Allah. Other people find the sacred exclusively within their chosen ethical values. Some people find the sacred in nature. You may find the sacred in something I haven't even mentioned yet. Here's one way of identifying what sacred means to you. Ask yourself, what gives me a feeling of awe or wonder? Do you feel awe when you see the vast Atlantic? I know that when I saw a total solar eclipse, I felt wonder. What gives you that feeling? Does anybody want to comment on what makes you feel wonder or awe? Excellent. So, if animals have that same feeling of awe, it's reasonable to think that they may be having spiritual experiences. I think it's easiest to see this if we start with the wild animals. Dr. Jane Goodall showed us those chimpanzees. She believes they may be having a spiritual experience, that feeling of wonder that takes them outside themselves and lets them connect with the sacred thundering waterfall. And afterwards, they just sit and watch the water move in a state that I can only think of as meditative and worshipful. One of the special things about animals is that they can't write theological treatises about the thundering waterfall. They can't preach sermons about it. As Jane Goodall says, their spirituality is entirely in their bodies, in their swaying and their dances and their stillness. How intense that must be for them. There are other examples in addition to the chimpanzees. Some believe that elephants engage in ancestor worship when they find the bones of their ancestors. A study by National Geographic has established that monkeys will gather at a certain spot on a cliff where they have the best view of the sunset, and they will sit there and watch. If the monkeys are eating when time for sunset comes, they will actually leave their meal to go and watch the sunset, and only afterward do they go back and finish their food. So the behavior of animals is one reason that scientists believe they have spiritual experiences. But there's more evidence. It turns out that the part of the brain where we humans experience spirituality is the animal brain, sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain. Scientists have studied the human brain and how it responds to spiritual experiences. Here's what they did. They studied 19 devout people. They hooked these 19 people up to an MRI machine and observed their brain activity while they were reading scripture, meditating, and praying. Now, which section of the brain do you think was activated on that MRI during the religious experiences? Was it the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our higher thinking and complex reasoning? No. When these 19 people had religious experiences, the part of their brain activated on the MRI was the limbic system. The limbic system is the more primitive part of the brain, which deals with emotions and pleasure. So that part of the brain where we experience spirituality is not the uniquely human part of our brain. It is the animal part of our brain, sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain, which we share with animals. It makes sense that animals have spiritual experiences since they have the right kind of brain for it. Evidence that animals worship is not limited to science. When we look to our various texts and sources, we find references to animals worshiping. Our Soul Matters theme this month is heritage, and I'd like to honor our heritage by reaching back to a few of our sources. Some of you may remember the Old Testament story of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. As they worshiped while they were in the furnace, they sang a certain hymn, which is recorded in the 3rd chapter of Daniel. Here is part of that hymn. Sea monsters and all water creatures, bless the Lord. All you birds of the air, bless the Lord. All you beasts, wild and tame, bless the Lord. Praise and exalt God above all forever. In the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, we find a description of animals worshiping God. Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them singing, to the one who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever. And this from the Quran. Do you not see that Allah is he who is glorified by all those who are in the heavens and the earth, and the very birds who spread their wings? Each one knows its own method of prayer and praise, and Allah knows well all that they do. And today we sang these words from our UU hymnal, calling the animals to worship with us. All creatures of the earth and sky, come kindred, lift your voices high. Alleluia. Even our call to worship can be interpreted as calling the animals to worship with us. From all who dwell below the skies, let faith and hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land by every tongue. So those are some of the things we know about the spiritual lives of wild animals. Now I'd like to discuss the spirituality of a different group of animals. What about the companion animals in our lives? Do they have spiritual experiences, these moments of wonder and of awe? I'd like to read for you a description by the British poet Christopher Smart of a cat worshiping. This is from a poem entitled Rejoice in the Lamb. Now, this demonstrates Christopher Smart's vivid imagination, but the entire work really is a reverent statement by a devout man. Here's what Christopher Smart said about his cat. For I will consider my cat Geoffrey, for he is the servant of the living God, duly and daily serving him. For at the first glance of the glory of God in the east, he worships in his way. For this is done by wreathing his body 7 times round with elegant quickness. So how can we support the spiritual lives of these wild animals and our companion animals. Well, before I get to that, I can't omit our dogs. Do dogs worship? Well, of course they do. What do you think that is happening when you come home after a long absence? If your dog had the resources to do it, your return after a long absence would involve a star in the east and singing by the heavenly hosts and frankincense and gold and myrrh. So what can we do to support them? Well, I think the first thing we can do for the wild animals is to leave them be, to support their habitat, to avoid polluting their homes and disturbing their lives. The wild places are their sanctuary every bit as much as this building is our sanctuary. We can also promote and sometimes even participate in the spiritual lives of our companion animals. Provide your cat with lots of toys. Get one of those fishing poles that some of them like so much, or get one of those red dot lasers that you can make move all over the place. Your cat might just worship for hours as long as you're willing to play with those toys. Or get some of that super duper catnip and spread it around and watch your cat have an ecstatic religious experience that will rival anything done elsewhere. As for your dog, just remember that he conducts a significant part of his worship with his nose. Take him to places where he can smell the smells. If you do that, his limbic system will be activated and he will experience wonder. The other thing you can do for your dog is to be a worthy deity. She worships you. So if you are a praying person, remember that prayer, Lord, help me to be the person my dog thinks I am. So we have talked about the wild animals and our companion animals. Now I'd like to speak to you from my heart, if I may. The third and final category of animals is a group that's less comfortable to think about. The animals whose lives are full of suffering. But we can't ignore these animals because they make up about 2/3 of the animals on earth. And ours is a faith which sees the world as it is. For me to give this sermon and fail to mention 2/3 of all animals on earth, frankly, would be easier for me, but it would be less than honest. Our seventh principle is not about the interdependent web of everything that's pleasant to think about. Our seventh principle is about the interdependent web of all existence. That web includes those horses who died at the racetrack this year, the dogs in fighting rings and puppy mills, the species being driven to extinction, the animals who suffer so a cosmetic company can market a new shade of lipstick, those who languish in other cruel and unnecessary experiments, the billions of animals who suffer and die unnecessarily on the factory farm and in the slaughterhouse. Do they have spiritual experiences? There is every reason to think so. They have a limbic system. And if we face facts with clear eyes, we realize that their most common spiritual experience is probably a prayer for mercy, a plea for justice. I'd like to suggest just one way we can support the spiritual lives of these animals and fulfill our covenant to honor the interdependent web of all existence. That is just to see them, literally or figuratively. I can't blame you if you haven't done much seeing of these animals. There are entire marketing departments and public relations firms who make millions of dollars trying to get us not to see them. But if we can see them with our hearts open and not turn away, we will honor their religious and spiritual experiences. One example of seeing animals comes from the Christian tradition. Jesus said, "Aren't sparrows sold 2 for a penny? Yet not one of them falls from the sky without your Father noticing." That's one way we can support this group of animals in their spirituality. We can notice them as God notices every sparrow who falls. Thank you for allowing me to speak today and to speak from my heart. I dearly hope that this sermon has enriched your life and the lives of all the animals you encounter. I'd like to close, if I may, with these words from the Old Testament book of Isaiah, words full of hope for the future. "The wolf also shall lie down with the lamb, and the leopard shall dwell with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed their young, and they shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Spirit of life as the waters cover the earth." May it be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'd like to invite our song leaders back up to lead us in our closing hymn, number 207, "Earth Was Given as a Garden," which can be found in the gray hymnal. I also invite the congregation to stand in body or spirit and join together in singing this closing hymn. Again, 207, "Earth Was Given as a Garden." We'll be singing all 3 verses. When we are finished, please remain standing for the benediction and the chalice extinguishing. Please remain standing for the benediction. I'd like to call John back up, please, to extinguish the chalice as I read these words from Gary Kalowski. Blessed are the faithful, for they shall be called dogs. Blessed are the playful, for they shall be surrounded with love and laughter. Blessed are those without worry, for through them we shall know peace. Blessed are those with no possessions, for they shall be rich in spiritual things. Blessed are the innocent, for theirs is the realm of heaven. Blessed are the animals, and blessed are we. May it be so. Thank you so much for being here with us today.